Hello, my dear friends. As the night grows quiet, imagine a world without modern medicine, without clear knowledge of germs, and without the comfort of hospitals. The year is in the middle of the 14th century. Streets are narrow. Houses are crowded. The smell of smoke, animals, and waste hangs in the air. This is the world where the Black Plague arrives, moving slowly from town to town like a dark season that no one understands. People do not know the word bacteria. They do not know about fleas or rats as carriers of disease. They only know that healthy people fall ill suddenly, that swelling appears under the arms and in the neck, and that fever follows quickly. Fear spreads faster than any traveler. Bells ring for the dead. Carts move through the streets collecting bodies. And yet, even in this world of confusion and danger, some people survive. Survival does not come from heroism. It comes from small, quiet choices made day after day. Most towns in medieval Europe are crowded and poorly ventilated. Families live close together. Animals often share the same space as humans. Waste is thrown into streets or shallow pits. In such places, disease spreads easily. Those who live in the busiest cities face the greatest danger, not because they are weaker, but because closeness makes illness travel quickly from one body to another. Some of the people who survive live on the edges of society. Farmers in isolated villages, shepherds in the hills, fishermen along quiet coasts. Their distance from trade routes protects them without their knowing why. Fewer strangers pass through their homes. Fewer rats arrive with cargo. Fewer fleas move from one body to another. Travel itself is dangerous during plague years. Merchants, pilgrims, and soldiers carry not only goods and news but illness. Roads that once meant opportunity now mean risk. Those who stay still, who avoid markets and crowded gatherings, unknowingly reduce their chances of infection. Inside towns, survival depends on space and air. Wealthier families sometimes leave the city for country houses when rumors of sickness appear. They do not understand disease, but they understand patterns. They know death follows crowds, so they seek gardens, fields, and fresh air. This simple movement away from density saves lives. Homes that survive better are those with windows that open. Smoke from fires, bad smells from streets, and damp air inside houses make sickness worse. Fresh air, even without scientific explanation, becomes a form of protection. People believe bad smells cause disease, so they try to avoid them. In doing so, they accidentally improve ventilation. Clothing also plays a role. Long robes and heavy fabrics collect fleas more easily. People who wear simpler, cleaner garments and who wash them when possible carry fewer insects. Bathing is not common in all places, but washing clothes in hot water and drying them in sunlight reduces parasites quietly and effectively. Food matters as well. Those who eat well before plague strikes are stronger when sickness comes. Bread, vegetables, and preserved meats keep bodies from weakening too quickly. Hunger lowers resistance. Famine years make plague deadlier. A well-fed body stands a better chance of surviving fever. Some families avoid sharing beds with the sick. Others isolate ill relatives in separate rooms if possible. This feels cruel, but it limits spread. Medieval people do not understand infection, but they see that sickness moves from person to person, so they begin to separate without knowing why it works. Monasteries and convents sometimes become places of refuge and sometimes places of disaster. When strict rules of cleanliness are followed, survival improves. When care is given without separation, Entire communities fall ill together. Discipline, even without knowledge, can save lives. Certain towns close their gates when plague appears nearby. Ships are held at sea. Travelers are stopped outside walls. This early form of quarantine is based on fear, not science, but it slows the movement of disease. Places that act quickly sometimes avoid the worst waves of death. People who handle the dead face great danger. Burial workers, priests, and family members who wash bodies are exposed constantly. Those who refuse this work or who cover themselves heavily while doing it survive more often. Distance again becomes protection. Even belief plays a role. Some turn to prayer and fasting, others to herbs and smoke. Some methods do nothing, others help accidentally. Burning certain plants drives away insects. Carrying strong-smelling herbs keeps fleas away from skin. What looks like superstition sometimes becomes survival. Children sometimes survive better than adults. The elderly often do not. Strong lungs and strong hearts matter. So does luck. Two people may live in the same house and face different outcomes. The plague does not follow simple rules, and yet patterns exist. Less crowding, more fresh air, cleaner clothing, isolation from the sick, avoiding trade routes, leaving cities when possible, limiting contact. These quiet habits form a shield without anyone realizing it. As the night deepens and the medieval world grows still, imagine a small home on the edge of a village. Smoke rises gently from its roof. Inside, a family eats simple food. They hear news of death in the distant city, but no strangers pass their door. The air is cool. Their clothes are clean, their lives are quiet. They do not know they are surviving history's greatest plague. They only know they are living carefully. And in a world without medicine, that careful living becomes the difference between life and death. The story does not end here. It continues into the streets, into the beliefs, into the strange treatments people tried, and into the lessons the plague left behind for future generations. As the dark years of plague continued to move slowly across medieval lands, people begin to notice that the disease does not strike everywhere in the same way. Some streets empty completely. Other streets remain strangely alive. Some families lose everyone. Others lose no one at all. These differences are not understood, but they are quietly observed. From these observations, habits begin to form. In crowded towns, the poorest districts suffer first and worst. Houses are packed tightly together. Whole families sleep in one room. Animals live nearby. Waste flows through narrow lanes. In these places, sickness travels quickly from breath to breath and from body to body. When one person falls ill, others follow within days. Survival becomes unlikely when space is scarce. Those who can afford space use it as protection. Wealthier households separate servants from masters. They place the sick in distant rooms. They keep visitors away, not because they understand disease, but because fear teaches them patterns. Distance feels safer than closeness. Silence feels safer than noise. Isolation feels safer than crowds. In many towns, fear changes daily routines. Markets grow quieter. Taverns close early. Church gatherings shrink. Weddings are postponed. Funerals become brief. Life slows down. This slowing reduces contact. Less contact means fewer chances for illness to pass from one body to another. Some towns attempt rules. In certain places, travelers must wait outside city walls before entering. Ships are kept in harbors for weeks before unloading. These delays feel harsh, but they reduce the arrival of sickness from infected regions. Without knowing it, medieval people begin practicing quarantine. Homes that survive best are those that remain clean by medieval standards. Floors are swept. Food is stored carefully. Bedding is aired in sunlight. Sunlight dries fabric and kills insects quietly. Open windows bring fresh air into rooms where sickness would otherwise linger. People who wash their hands and faces more often do not know they are removing germs. They only know they feel better afterward. Water from wells and rivers becomes precious. Clean water keeps bodies stronger. Strength makes fever easier to endure. Herbal remedies spread through villages and towns. Some herbs do nothing. Others help by accident. Lavender, rosemary, and mint repel insects. Smoke from burning plants fills rooms and drives fleas away. These smells are believed to fight bad air, but what they truly fight are the small creatures carrying disease. Clothing habits shift. People begin changing clothes more often. They avoid wearing garments taken from the dead. They fear that clothes carry death. This fear is not wrong. Fleas hide in fabric. Avoiding used clothing becomes a form of protection. Some families choose to leave towns entirely. They travel to countryside homes, monasteries, or distant farms. Life there is harder, but safer. Fewer people pass through. Food is grown locally. Rats are fewer than in ports and cities. Distance from trade becomes distance from death. Not everyone can leave. Those who remain must survive inside danger. They learn to recognize early signs of illness: fever, swelling, sudden weakness. When they see these signs, they avoid the person, even if it feels cruel. Love becomes separation. Survival becomes loneliness. Doctors wear strange clothing, long robes, masks shaped like beaks. Inside the beaks are herbs and spices. They believe this protects them from bad air. It also keeps distance between their faces and the sick. Distance again becomes safety. Burial practices change. Bodies are buried faster. Graves are dug outside towns. Families no longer wash the dead themselves. These changes reduce contact with infected bodies. Again, fear teaches what science has not yet explained. Religion shapes behavior too. Some believe plague is punishment. They pray and fast. Others believe it is fate. They give up. But those who combine belief with practical caution survive more often than those who do only one or the other. Children are kept indoors. Play moves from streets to small yards. This reduces contact with other children carrying sickness. Families become small worlds inside large, dangerous cities. Some people wear charms. Others carry vinegar-soaked cloths. Vinegar cleans skin. It also kills some bacteria. They do not know this. They only know it smells strong and feels protective. What feels protective sometimes becomes protective. The plague does not teach through words, it teaches through loss. Those who observe patterns quietly live longer than those who deny danger. Slow life, less travel, more space, cleaner clothes, fresh air, isolation of the sick. These are not medical instructions, they are survival habits. As the night deepens over medieval rooftops, imagine a small household closing its door. Outside, bells ring for the dead. Inside, a candle burns. Windows are open slightly. Clothes hang near the fire. Food is simple but warm. No visitors come. No journeys are made. They do not feel brave. They feel afraid, but their fear guides them wisely. And in a time without knowledge of germs or medicine, wisdom grows from watching what keeps people alive. The story continues onward, into strange cures, false hopes, and the lessons this great sickness carved into the memory of Europe. As the plague continues its slow movement across towns and villages, people begin to live inside a strange new routine, shaped entirely by fear and observation. They do not understand sickness in the way we do now, but they understand patterns. They see that certain homes are struck again and again while others remain untouched. They notice that some streets empty quickly, while others remain quiet but alive. From these quiet observations, a new way of living begins to form. Inside the home, life becomes simpler and more controlled. Families stop welcoming guests, doors remain closed, meals are eaten with fewer people. The inside of the house becomes a small world of safety surrounded by a larger world of danger. Parents watch children closely. Movement is limited. Every cough is noticed. Every fever brings fear. People begin to believe that bad air causes illness, so they try to protect themselves from it. Windows are opened when possible. Smoke from burning herbs fills rooms. Cloths soaked in vinegar are held near the face. These actions are not based on science, but they change the environment in useful ways. Fresh air reduces trapped moisture. Smoke drives away insects. Vinegar cleans skin and fabric. What feels like ritual becomes quiet protection. Water becomes more important than ever. Those who wash their hands and faces more often feel stronger. Those who wash clothes in hot water and dry them in sunlight notice fewer insects. Sunlight, without anyone knowing why, kills germs and parasites. Light becomes a medicine without a name. Clothing habits change slowly. People stop wearing heavy layers unless necessary. They avoid sharing clothes. They fear garments taken from the dead. This fear is wise. Fleas hide in fabric. Avoiding used clothes reduces contact with infected insects. Simpler clothing becomes safer clothing. Food is prepared with more care. Families cook their meals thoroughly. Raw food is avoided when possible. Cooking kills bacteria without being understood as such. Warm meals help weak bodies fight fever. Hunger weakens the body. Full bellies strengthen it. Those who eat regularly survive more often than those who starve. Work changes too. Some trades disappear for a time. Markets grow quiet. Workshops close. Craftsmen stay home. Farming continues because it must, but field work is done with distance between workers. People speak less and observe more. Silence becomes part of survival. Those who must travel do so carefully. They avoid crowded inns. They sleep outside when possible. They carry their own food. They wash their hands when water is found. They avoid touching strangers. Travel becomes a risk taken only when necessary. Doctors try many treatments. Bloodletting weakens patients. Mercury poisons them. Strange mixtures of herbs and minerals are given. Some cures fail. Others accidentally help. Warm teas keep bodies hydrated. Certain plants reduce pain and swelling. Rest, when allowed, gives the body time to fight. Some cities become known as safer than others, not because they are lucky, but because they change their behavior quickly. They close gates. They stop festivals. They cancel gatherings. They force ships to wait outside ports. These actions are unpopular, but they slow the arrival of disease. time becomes a weapon. Families begin to separate sick members from healthy ones. A child with fever is placed in another room. A parent with swelling is given food through a door. Love becomes distance. Distance becomes protection. It feels cruel, but it saves lives. Funeral customs change. Bodies are buried quickly. Coffins are simple. Touch is avoided. Priests bless from afar. Mourning becomes quiet. Tears are private. Large funerals spread disease. Small ones reduce risk. Even animals are noticed. Rats run through streets. Fleas jump from fur to cloth. People begin killing rats without knowing their true role. They keep cats. They clean barns. They store food in raised containers. This reduces the presence of carriers without naming them. Children who survive learn new rules. Do not touch strangers. Do not play in crowded streets. Do not visit sick homes. Their world becomes smaller, but safer. Childhood changes shape. Play moves indoors. Silence replaces noise. Some people believe charms and symbols protect them. Crosses, stones, written prayers. These do nothing to the disease itself, but they give courage. Courage helps people follow hard rules like isolation and separation. Belief becomes strength. Luck still matters. Two neighbors may live differently but face different outcomes. One falls ill, one does not. The plague does not follow logic perfectly. It moves with chance as much as with cause. But chance favors those who live carefully. In the countryside, life continues more quietly. Fields still grow crops. Villages still bake bread. Fewer travelers pass through. Fewer ships arrive. Fewer strangers bring illness. Isolation becomes protection without being named as such. Over time, people begin to understand one thing clearly. The plague does not reward bravery. It rewards caution. It does not spare the strong. It spares the careful. Those who reduce contact, who clean their homes, who avoid crowds, and who leave cities when possible live longer than those who do not. As the medieval night settles over silent streets, imagine a house with shutters closed and a candle burning inside. A family eats warm soup. Clothes hang near the fire to dry. Windows are open just enough for air to move. No visitors knock. No one leaves. They do not feel safe. They feel careful. And in a time without medicine, careful living becomes the closest thing to a cure. The plague still walks outside. Bells still ring. Graves still open. But inside this small space, life continues quietly, shaped by habits born from watching who lives and who dies. The story moves forward now into the strange remedies people trusted, the false hopes they followed, and the lessons this sickness carved into the memory of the world. As the plague continues its long and silent march across Europe, people begin to change not only how they live, but how they think about danger. At first, death feels sudden and mysterious. Later, it begins to feel patterned. Certain behaviors appear to invite sickness. Other behaviors seem to keep it away. From these quiet discoveries, a new kind of daily life takes shape. Fear no longer feels sharp and sudden. It becomes slow and constant. People wake each morning listening for bells. They look out their windows before opening doors. They study the faces of neighbors for signs of fever. The world outside feels like moving water, always shifting, always uncertain. In many towns, people stop gathering in large numbers. Taverns grow empty. Market stalls stand silent. Music fades from streets that once held laughter. Public life shrinks. Private life grows inward. Families spend more time together inside closed homes, learning to exist in smaller spaces without visitors or celebration. Inside these homes, cleanliness becomes more important than ever before. Floors are swept daily. Ash and dust are thrown away. Bedding is shaken outside. Food scraps are buried or burned. These acts are not called hygiene. They are called caution. Yet they remove fleas, rats, and filth without anyone naming them as causes. Water is treated with new respect. Buckets are kept covered. Wells are guarded. Clothes are washed more often. Hands are wiped before eating. Faces are rinsed after returning from outside. These habits feel small, but they build invisible walls between bodies and sickness. Some families burn herbs every evening. Others hang bundles of lavender and rosemary near doors. The smell fills rooms and drives away insects. Smoke curls upward and settles into walls and fabric. People believe it cleans bad air. In truth, it pushes away fleas and insects that carry death. When someone in the house becomes ill, the family moves carefully. The sick person is given their own bed. Their bowls and cups are kept separate. Food is passed without touch. This separation feels painful, but it prevents the sickness from spreading to others in the home. Love becomes distance again. Distance becomes safety again. Doctors continue to try their methods. Some bleed their patients. Some use strong chemicals. Many treatments weaken bodies instead of helping them. Yet a few habits do help. Rest is encouraged. Warm drinks are given. Fresh air is allowed into rooms. These simple acts give the body time and strength to fight the fever. Certain towns become known as careful towns. They close their gates early. They refuse travelers. They stop trade temporarily. Guards watch roads. Ships wait outside harbors. These towns suffer economically, but they survive longer. Time becomes their shield. People who work with the sick begin wearing special clothing. Thick robes, gloves, masks filled with herbs. These clothes do not stop disease completely, but they reduce direct contact. They create space between breath and breath, skin and skin. Space becomes another form of medicine. Funerals become quieter. Bodies are wrapped quickly, coffins are sealed. Graves are dug far from homes. Families do not gather closely. Prayers are spoken from a distance. Mourning changes shape. Loss becomes private. This reduces the spread of sickness without anyone saying why. Rats become enemies. People notice them dying before humans do. They kill rats when they see them. They keep food stored high. They keep cats. Barns are cleaned. Grain is sealed. These acts lower the number of fleas without naming them as carriers. Children grow up learning rules that did not exist before. Do not touch strangers. Do not enter sick houses. Do not play near bodies. Wash your hands when you come inside. Keep your clothes clean. Childhood becomes quieter and more careful. Some people believe the plague is sent by God. They pray harder. Others believe it is carried by stars. They study the sky. Others believe it comes from poison in wells. They guard water sources. Some beliefs are wrong. Some actions still help. Belief shapes behavior, and behavior shapes survival. People who ignore danger fall ill more often. Those who deny the plague continue to gather and celebrate. Their homes empty faster. Their streets grow quiet sooner. Careless life becomes short life. The plague teaches without words. It teaches through who remains alive. Over time, people understand something simple. Survival does not belong to the strongest. It belongs to the most careful. It belongs to those who change their habits, even when change feels painful. As night falls on medieval towns, windows glow faintly behind closed shutters. Inside, families sit near small fires. They eat simple meals. They speak softly. They listen for sounds outside. They wait. They do not know about bacteria. They do not know about fleas. They only know that space, air, and cleanliness keep death farther away. And in a world without medicine, these small choices become the difference between walking the streets tomorrow or becoming one of the bells that rings today. The story moves forward into the strange cures people trusted, the mistakes they made, and the knowledge this great sickness left behind for future generations. As the plague years stretch on, people begin to live inside a new kind of normal. The first shock of death has passed. What remains is a careful, quiet way of moving through each day. Streets are still dangerous, but they are no longer mysterious. Danger now has a shape. It looks like crowds, it sounds like coughing. It smells like closed rooms and damp cloth. Survival depends on learning to notice these signs and to step away from them. In many towns, families create small worlds within their homes. They store food for longer periods. They limit how often they go outside. When they do leave, they choose early morning or late evening, when fewer people are present. The rhythm of the city changes. Busy hours fade. Silence replaces noise. This silence is not peace. It is protection. Work becomes selective. Some jobs stop completely. Others change form. Bakers work at night. Farmers sell grain from a distance. Money is exchanged without touch. Goods are left at doors. People knock and step back. These small customs reduce closeness without needing explanation. Trade continues, but slowly and cautiously. Water sources become guarded. Wells are watched. Buckets are not shared freely. People fear poison and sickness in water, so they handle it carefully. Clean water keeps bodies stronger. Strength helps the body endure fever. Those who drink from clean sources survive more often than those who do not. Food storage improves. Grain is kept in sealed barrels. Meat is smoked or salted. Rats are driven away with traps and cats. By protecting food, people reduce hunger and reduce pests at the same time. Fewer rats mean fewer fleas. Fewer fleas mean fewer infections. This chain is not understood, but it works. Homes begin to smell of smoke and herbs. Fires burn small and steady. Windows open when weather allows. Smoke carries insects away. Air moves through rooms. Dampness dries. These changes make homes less welcoming to fleas and less suffocating to lungs. The house itself becomes part of survival. Clothing routines grow stricter. People change clothes when returning home. Garments are aired near fires. Shoes are left outside. Cloaks are brushed and shaken. These habits remove insects and dirt without knowing they are removing disease. Fabric becomes less dangerous when it is cleaned and dried. Some people choose to live outdoors more than before. They sleep in sheds or barns. They work in open fields. Open air feels safer than closed rooms. Even when cold, fresh air reduces sickness. The body breathes more easily. Fever feels less heavy. Doctors continue to struggle. They still use methods that weaken patients, but some begin to notice that rest and warmth help more than cutting or bleeding. Patients who are allowed to lie quietly sometimes survive. Those forced into painful treatments often do not. Experience slowly teaches what theory cannot. Priests and caretakers learn caution too. They no longer touch the sick freely. They speak prayers from doorways. They wear thick gloves. They wash after visits. Their role changes from closeness to distance. Faith remains, but contact lessens. Burial workers develop their own habits. They wrap bodies quickly. They avoid touching faces. They burn clothes taken from the dead. They wash with vinegar and ash. These practices reduce their risk without naming it as such. Survival belongs even to those who work among death. Children absorb these habits naturally. They learn not to hug strangers. They learn to wash their hands. They learn to avoid sick homes. Their games become quiet and close to home. A generation grows up shaped by caution rather than celebration. Rumors still spread. Some say the plague rides on fog. Others say it hides in shadows. Fear invents many stories. But alongside fear grows practical knowledge. People who live quietly live longer. People who move carefully stay alive. Those who travel far suffer more. Those who welcome many guests lose more. Those who refuse crowds remain standing when others fall. Distance becomes a shield. Time becomes an ally. As the medieval night settles over narrow streets, lanterns glow behind closed doors. Inside, families sit close to small fires. They eat what they have stored. They speak softly. They wait for another day. They do not know about bacteria. They do not know about fleas. They do not know about infection. They only know that staying apart keeps them together. And in a world without science, this slow wisdom becomes the strongest medicine anyone can make. The story moves forward now into the strange cures people trusted, the false paths they followed, and the hard lessons the plague carved into the future of cities and health. As the years of plague continue to pass, survival becomes less about sudden reaction and more about long, careful adjustment. By now, many people no longer panic at the first sound of a bell or the first rumor of sickness. Fear still exists, but it has changed shape. It has become slow, thoughtful, and watchful. People wake each morning not expecting safety, but preparing for caution. They look out from their doors before stepping into the street. They listen for coughing. They notice which houses remain dark and which still show signs of life. In this way, entire towns begin to read themselves like maps of danger and safety. Survival depends not on bravery, but on learning how to move gently through a world that has become unpredictable. Inside the home, life grows more disciplined. Families create strict routines without calling them rules. Shoes are left outside or near the door. Hands are washed whenever water is available. Clothes are aired near the fire at night. Bedding is shaken and laid in sunlight when weather allows. Floors are swept often, not for beauty, but to remove dust, insects, and waste. These habits slowly change the nature of the house itself. The home becomes cleaner, drier, and less welcoming to rats and fleas. Even without knowing the true cause of the disease, people are shaping their space in ways that reduce the presence of what carries it. The house turns into a shield made of wood, air, and fire. Food preparation becomes another quiet form of protection. Families stop eating food that has been sitting out too long. Meat is smoked or salted more carefully. Bread is baked fresh when possible. Leftovers are kept away from animals. Water is boiled more often, not because people understand germs, but because warm water is believed to be safer than cold. Cooking becomes slower and more careful. This not only prevents hunger, but strengthens the body, and a stronger body survives fever better than a weak one. Hunger and sickness become linked in people's minds. To stay alive, one must eat wisely and regularly, even when supplies are low. Work outside the home changes shape. People who must leave their houses choose times when streets are empty. They avoid crowded markets and busy crossings. They speak less. They touch less. Money is left on tables instead of passed from hand to hand. Goods are placed on doorsteps instead of carried inside. These small customs feel strange at first, but they soon become normal. Distance becomes polite. Silence becomes respectful. People begin to see closeness not as kindness, but as danger. The shape of human interaction itself changes under the pressure of survival. Medical practice remains confused and often harmful, but even doctors slowly learn from experience. They see that patients who are allowed to rest and drink warm liquids survive more often than those who are cut or poisoned by strong treatments. Some doctors still believe illness must be pulled from the body through bleeding, but others begin to doubt. They notice that pain weakens people who are already weak. They notice that warmth and quiet sometimes allow recovery. Without understanding why, they begin to change what they do. Observation slowly replaces theory. Religion also changes its shape. People still pray, but they pray at home more often than in churches. Large gatherings are feared. Worship becomes quieter and more private. Families light candles instead of attending services. This reduces crowds without being called health protection. Faith remains, but it moves indoors, and this movement saves lives. Even belief learns to bend around survival. The handling of the dead becomes one of the most important changes of all. Bodies are no longer washed and dressed by loved ones. They are wrapped quickly. They are carried out at night or early morning. Graves are dug far from homes. Clothes belonging to the dead are burned. This feels harsh and unloving, but it prevents the disease from spreading further. Grief becomes distant. Memory replaces touch. Mourning becomes quiet. Survival reshapes emotion itself. Children born during plague years grow up knowing only this careful world. They do not remember open markets or crowded festivals. They learn early to avoid strangers and to stay close to home. Their games are quieter. Their movements are watched. They wash their hands because everyone does. They accept distance as normal. A generation grows up trained by disease without being taught its name. In the countryside, survival looks different but follows the same logic. Villages that receive few travelers lose fewer people. Farms that are far from trade roads remain safer. Families who live close to animals learn to clean barns more often and to store food more carefully. They keep cats. They seal grain. They burn waste. These actions reduce rats and fleas without anyone knowing their true role. Distance from the world becomes closeness to life. Rumors continue to travel. Some say the plague is carried by fog. Others say it rides on wind. Some say it is sent by God. Others blame enemies. Fear invents many stories, but beneath these stories, a quiet truth takes shape. Those who reduce contact survive more often than those who do not. Those who keep their homes clean live longer than those who do not. Those who leave cities early escape more often than those who stay. These truths are not written in books. They are written in who remains alive. As the long medieval night falls over towns and villages, windows glow faintly behind closed shutters. Inside, families eat simple meals. Fires burn low. Clothes dry near warmth. Air moves slowly through open cracks in walls. Outside, the world feels dangerous and empty. Inside, life continues carefully, patiently, without knowing how close it is to changing history. They do not know they are practicing early public health. They do not know they are reducing infection. They only know that quiet living keeps death farther away. And in a time without science, without medicine, and without knowledge of germs, this slow discipline becomes the closest thing the world has to survival. The story continues onward, into the strange cures that people trusted, the mistakes that cost lives, and the lessons the plague left behind for future generations who would one day name what medieval people only feared. As the plague years continue, people begin to understand that survival is not only about avoiding sickness, but about enduring long periods of fear without breaking their way of life. The danger no longer feels like a sudden storm. It feels like a long winter that does not end. In this long winter, habits become stronger than panic. Towns that survive best are not the ones with the strongest walls, but the ones with the most patient people. They accept that life must move slowly. They accept that safety is found in routine rather than in courage. Daily movement becomes planned like a careful walk across thin ice. People step outside only when needed. They choose paths with fewer houses. They avoid narrow streets where air feels heavy and damp. They pass others with space between them. Greetings become short and distant. Voices are softer. Even laughter sounds different, as if it must not travel too far. In this way, the city reshapes itself without being rebuilt. The same streets exist, but they are used differently, and this change in use changes who lives and who dies. Inside the home, people learn to read signs of illness with sharp attention. A warm forehead, a sudden weakness, a swelling under the arm or along the neck. These signs no longer surprise them. They fear them, but they also act on them. When sickness appears, the house changes shape. One room becomes separate. One set of bowls is kept apart. One blanket is not shared. Food is passed without touch. The family becomes two small groups instead of one. This division feels painful, but it slows the spread of death inside the walls of the home. Love becomes careful. Care becomes distance. The way people use air changes deeply. Rooms are no longer kept closed against cold without thought. Windows are opened when possible. Smoke from fires is allowed to rise and escape. Damp cloth is dried. Beds are placed where air can move. People believe they are fighting bad smells, but what they are truly fighting is trapped air where illness can linger. Fresh air becomes a quiet medicine that no one can name. Food continues to shape survival. Those who can grow vegetables behind their houses depend less on markets. Those who keep chickens or goats depend less on butchers. Families who store grain and salt meat survive long months without visiting crowded places. The home becomes not only a shelter, but a small system of life. Hunger and sickness walk together, and people who avoid hunger often avoid death as well. Doctors remain uncertain, but the idea of rest slowly gains importance. Patients who are not forced into harsh treatments sometimes recover. Warm drinks are given. Blankets are kept dry. The sick are not made to walk or travel. Stillness becomes part of healing. Even without knowing about immune systems, people see that the body fights better when it is not pushed. Fear of the dead reshapes entire towns. Burial grounds move farther away. Bodies are not kept in homes overnight. Funeral gatherings shrink. Priests speak blessings from a distance. This change does not come from cruelty, but from exhaustion and observation. Every large gathering after a death seems to bring more death, so gatherings grow smaller. Silence replaces ceremony. Work with animals also changes. People clean barns more often. They move grain higher off the ground. They close gaps in walls where rats enter. Cats are welcomed. Dogs guard food stores. This does not end the plague, but it reduces the number of rats and fleas near human beds. The space between animal life and human life becomes clearer, and this separation saves lives without anyone understanding why. Travel becomes a mark of danger. Those who journey from town to town are watched with suspicion. Some towns refuse them entry. Others force them to wait outside walls for days or weeks. These waiting periods feel cruel, but they prevent sudden waves of sickness from entering new places. Time itself becomes a test. If a traveler survives waiting, they may enter. If not, the town remains untouched. Quarantine is born from fear, not knowledge, but it works. Children raised in these years carry the habits forward. They grow up knowing that crowds are dangerous, that hands must be washed, that sickness means separation. Their memories are shaped by closed doors and quiet streets. When the plague finally weakens, these habits do not disappear at once. They remain in the way people think about health, distance, and cleanliness. Across Europe, the plague moves in waves, not once, but many times. Each wave teaches the same lesson again. Those who rush back to old habits die faster than those who keep their careful ways. Forgetting danger brings it back. Remembering it pushes it away. As night falls again on medieval towns, the streets lie empty under moonlight. Doors are closed. Windows glow faintly. Inside, families breathe slowly. Fires burn low. Water is kept nearby. Food is prepared for tomorrow. No one feels safe, but many remain alive. They have learned something simple without knowing its name. Survival belongs to those who change their behavior when the world changes. It belongs to those who accept distance, silence, and patience as tools. And in a world without medicine, without science, and without clear answers, this quiet discipline becomes the shield that stands between life and death. The story continues onward, into the strange cures people trusted, the dangerous mistakes they made, and the knowledge that slowly grew from fear into understanding. As the plague years continue to return again and again, people slowly realize that survival is not decided in one moment, but shaped by how long they can hold on to careful habits. At first, many try to return to normal life too quickly. Markets reopen, festivals return, crowds gather once more, and then quietly, sickness returns with them. From this painful pattern, a deeper understanding begins to grow. The plague does not disappear just because people wish it gone. It waits for closeness. It waits for noise. It waits for careless movement. Those who remember this truth live longer than those who forget it. In many towns, houses begin to look different from before. Walls are repaired more often. Cracks are filled. Floors are kept dry. Straw bedding is changed regularly. People notice that damp places smell worse and feel heavier in the chest. Dry rooms feel safer. Fires are kept burning not only for warmth, but to drive moisture from the air. Smoke becomes part of daily life, curling along ceilings and escaping through small openings. carrying insects and foul smells away with it. Homes slowly become cleaner, brighter, and less friendly to pests, even though no one speaks of bacteria or fleas. People begin to understand the importance of watching the outside world before stepping into it. News of sickness in nearby villages changes behavior immediately. Travel is delayed. Guests are refused. Trade slows. This waiting is difficult because it brings hunger and loneliness, but it brings fewer deaths. Families who stay inside their own small circles survive more often than those who open their doors too freely. Trust becomes rare. Caution becomes a form of kindness. The handling of objects changes as much as the handling of people. Letters are held over smoke. Coins are washed in vinegar. Packages are left outside for hours before being touched. These acts are based on fear of poison or bad air, but they reduce contact with infected fleas and fluids. Even tools are cleaned more often. Knives, bowls, and cups are kept separate between family members. The home becomes divided into safe and unsafe spaces, even if no one uses those words. Medical care remains uncertain, but some lessons grow stronger with time. People see that those who are kept warm and given liquids have a better chance of survival than those who are forced to endure harsh treatments. Rest becomes more respected. Patients are allowed to lie quietly. Strong smells are used to clear the room. Windows are opened when weather allows. Pain is no longer seen as proof that treatment is working. Slowly, suffering is no longer mistaken for healing. Religious life continues to change shape. Churches are still important, but large gatherings are feared. Prayer becomes something done in homes rather than in crowds. Candles burn in windows instead of on altars. Families pray together instead of joining neighbors. Faith does not disappear. It moves inward. This movement saves lives without being named as protection. Fear of outsiders grows stronger. Travelers are questioned. Their clothes are watched. Their health is examined. Some towns build small huts outside their walls for those who arrive from far away. These travelers wait there for days before being allowed inside. If they fall ill, they are kept away. If they remain healthy, they may enter. This waiting feels cruel, but it becomes one of the strongest barriers against sudden outbreaks. Time becomes a test of safety. People who work with the sick develop their own strict routines. They change clothes before entering their homes. They wash in vinegar and water. They burn what they wear while caring for patients. These habits grow from fear, but they reduce the number of people who carry disease back to their families. Even those who walk among death learn how to keep life near them. Children who grow up during these years carry the plague inside their memories. They learn not to touch their faces in public. They learn not to run into crowds. They learn to fear coughing more than shouting. Their bodies grow up, but their habits remain shaped by disease. When the plague weakens, these habits do not vanish. They remain part of daily life, shaping the future long after the sickness fades. Across the countryside, similar patterns appear. Villages that limit visitors survive better than those that welcome everyone. Farms that store food, suffer less hunger. Barns that are cleaned often have fewer rats. Distance from trade routes becomes distance from plague. Isolation becomes safety without being named as such. Slowly, without books or teachers, people learn one deep truth. The plague does not only attack bodies, it attacks connections. It moves along roads. It moves through hands. It moves through breath and fabric and fur. Those who break these paths survive more often than those who leave them open. As another medieval night falls, the world feels quieter than it once did. Streets are wide and empty. Doors are closed. Fires glow behind walls. Inside, families sit in small circles of light. They eat simple food. They drink clean water. They wait. They do not know the word infection. They do not know the word quarantine. They only know that slowness keeps them alive. And in a world without science, this slow, careful living becomes the strongest shield against a sickness no one can see. The story continues onward, into the strange hopes people placed in cures, the dangerous paths they followed, and the lessons that would one day shape how future generations fight invisible enemies. As the long years of plague stretch onward, people begin to understand that survival is not only about avoiding sickness, but about learning how to live inside a broken world without breaking themselves. The danger outside does not vanish, yet life must still continue in small, careful ways. Fields must be planted, bread must be baked, children must grow. The plague teaches people to build a quiet balance between fear and routine, between caution and the need to keep moving forward. Villages and towns slowly develop their own rhythms of safety. Certain days are chosen for trade, and even then, people stand apart from one another. Goods are placed on tables or on the ground instead of passed by hand. Coins are dropped into bowls of vinegar or water. Sellers step back as buyers step forward. These small dances of distance replace the old closeness of the marketplace. Trade does not stop completely, but it becomes slower and more deliberate, shaped by the belief that every touch carries risk. Inside homes, families learn to create layers of protection. The outside world is treated as unclean. Shoes and cloaks are left near the door. Hands are washed before touching food. Clothes worn outside are hung near fire or smoke. These habits are not called hygiene, but they perform the same work. They strip away fleas, dirt, and unseen sickness from the body before it can enter the heart of the home. The doorway becomes a border between danger and safety. People also begin to watch the seasons more closely. They notice that plague often worsens in warm months and fades in colder ones. This does not stop the disease, but it changes behavior. During dangerous seasons, travel slows. Gatherings are postponed. Families stay closer to their own houses. In safer months, they breathe more freely, but never completely forget what the warm air can bring. Memory becomes a form of protection. The sick are no longer treated as part of daily life. They are placed apart, not because they are hated, but because they are feared. Care is given through doors and windows. Food is left at a distance. Words replace touch. This hurts deeply, especially when the sick are loved ones, but it prevents whole households from falling at once. Separation becomes a form of mercy, even when it feels like cruelty. Doctors and healers still search for answers. Many of their treatments fail, but some ideas begin to change. They stop crowding around patients. They keep windows open. They wash their hands and tools more often. They notice that when they do these things, fewer of them fall ill. Slowly, without knowing it, they move closer to truth. By stepping away from false certainty, religion continues to shape behavior. Some still believe the plague is a punishment, but others begin to see it as something that follows human paths rather than divine anger. They notice that travelers bring it, that markets spread it, that silence weakens it. Faith remains, but fear teaches practical wisdom alongside prayer. Burial practices become almost mechanical in their care. Bodies are wrapped in cloth. They are moved quickly. Graves are dug far from wells and homes. Clothing is burned. These actions prevent the sickness from lingering in the spaces where the living must remain. Death is handled in ways that protect life. Children who grow up in this time become quiet observers of adult behavior. They learn to watch hands, faces, and movements. They learn that coughing means danger, that stillness means safety. Their education is not written in books, but in daily habits shaped by loss. They grow into adults who carry these lessons forward, even after the plague weakens. Across the countryside, farmers continue to work, but they work with space between one another. Villages close themselves off when sickness appears nearby. They send messages instead of visitors. They trade through gates instead of open doors. Distance becomes part of community life rather than its enemy. What slowly becomes clear is that the plague moves along lines of connection. It follows roads. It follows ships. It follows crowds. Those who cut these lines, even without knowing why, break the path of sickness. They do not defeat it, but they slow it. And in slowing it, they give bodies time to heal and communities time to breathe. As another medieval evening falls, the world feels smaller than before. Streets are empty. Markets are quiet. Doors are closed. Yet behind those doors, life still exists. Fires burn. Bread is shared. Water is poured. Children sleep. The world has not ended. It has narrowed. They do not know the word bacteria. They do not know the word transmission. They only know that distance keeps life close. And in this careful, narrowed world, survival becomes not an act of courage, but an act of patience. The story continues onward, into the strange cures people trusted, the false beliefs they clung to, and the long shadow the plague would leave on medicine and cities for centuries to come. As the plague continues to rise and fall in slow repeating waves, people begin to realize that this sickness is not a single event, but a long presence that must be lived with carefully. It is no longer enough to escape once or hide for a short season. Survival now depends on how long a person can keep careful habits without growing tired of them. Many who die do not die because they ignored danger at first, but because they slowly return to old ways when fear fades. Crowds return, celebrations return, touch returns, and with them, the plague returns too. From this painful lesson, some families learn to hold their distance, even when the streets begin to look safe again. Homes continue to change their shape and meaning. They are no longer only places of rest, but places of defense. The doorway becomes a point of decision. What enters the house is watched. Visitors are questioned. Packages are left outside before being brought in. Shoes and cloaks are removed quickly. Water is kept near the door for washing. Smoke from herbs and wood fills the air each evening. These actions are not written into law, but they become family customs, passed quietly from parent to child. The home becomes a small island of safety surrounded by uncertain streets. The way people think about air grows stronger with time. Rooms are no longer sealed tightly against the cold without thought. Windows are opened whenever possible. Fires are used to dry damp walls and bedding. People notice that sickness feels heavier in dark, wet spaces and lighter in bright, moving air. They believe this is because bad air is leaving the room, and in this belief they create healthier spaces. The house slowly becomes brighter and less crowded, not by design, but by survival. Food continues to shape who lives and who weakens. Those who can grow even small gardens beside their homes rely less on markets. Onions, beans, and herbs become treasures. Chickens and goats provide steady nourishment. Families who depend only on trade suffer more when markets close. Those who depend on their own small supplies endure longer. Hunger opens the door to sickness. Full bellies keep it partly closed. Care for the sick becomes more organized. In some towns, small buildings are set aside outside the main streets where ill people can be kept. These places are not hospitals as we know them, but they separate sickness from health. Care is given with caution. Workers change clothes after visits. Bedding is burned. Floors are cleaned with ash and vinegar. These practices come from fear, but they slow the spread of disease within the town. Separation becomes community protection. Doctors, healers, and caretakers slowly change how they behave. They stop gathering in large numbers around patients. They begin to keep distance. They wash more often. They open windows. They speak instead of touch. Without understanding bacteria, they move closer to safer practice by learning from loss. Those who continue old methods die more often. Those who change survive longer. Experience becomes teacher where books fail. Travel grows even more suspicious. Caravans are avoided. Ships are held outside harbors. Messengers are watched closely. Some towns build small huts along roads where travelers must wait before entering. This waiting is hard and lonely, but it becomes one of the strongest protections against sudden outbreaks. Time itself becomes a test of health. If sickness does not appear, entry is allowed. If it does, the town remains untouched. Religious life remains, but its form continues to shrink inward. Large pilgrimages are feared. Processions are stopped. Instead, families pray in their own rooms. Candles burn in windows. Bells ring for the dead, but fewer gather to hear them. Faith remains, but it no longer demands closeness. Belief learns to live beside caution. Children raised during these years grow into adults who remember a quiet world. They remember empty streets. They remember not touching strangers. They remember the smell of smoke and herbs in their homes. When later generations try to return to loud markets and crowded festivals, these adults hesitate. Memory itself becomes a guide for behavior. Across Europe, cities that learn slowly but steadily survive better than those that rush back into noise and trade. Places that hold on to distance, cleanliness, and careful movement lose fewer people over time. These habits do not defeat the plague, but they weaken it. They turn sudden disaster into something slower and more manageable. As another long medieval evening settles over stone streets and wooden roofs, the world feels smaller but steadier. Doors close early. Windows glow softly. Inside, families sit in warm circles of light. They drink clean water. They eat simple food. They breathe air that moves gently through their rooms. Outside, the plague still walks. Inside, patience holds its ground. They do not know the science of disease. They do not know the names of microbes. They only know that care must last longer than fear. And in a time without medicine, this long patience becomes the strongest form of survival the medieval world can create. As the plague remains woven into everyday life, people begin to understand that survival is not only about avoiding sickness, but about rebuilding meaning inside a damaged world. When death becomes common, hope must change its shape. Instead of dreaming about distant futures, people focus on the next meal, the next clean cup of water, the next quiet night without fever. Life grows smaller, but it also grows more deliberate. Each safe day becomes a success. Each unbroken household becomes a victory. Communities that last through repeated waves of plague slowly learn to organize themselves around caution. Neighbors agree not to visit each other's homes freely. Messages are passed through doors and windows. News is shouted across streets instead of whispered face to face. Bells and flags are used to warn of sickness. These signals replace gatherings. Information travels without bodies having to move close together. In this way, communication survives even when contact becomes dangerous. Inside homes, people begin to separate daily tasks more carefully. One person handles food. Another cleans. Another goes outside when necessary. These roles are not official, but they reduce how many people touch the same objects. Bowls and cups are kept for specific family members. Bedding is not shared. Even tools used for work are kept apart when possible. The house becomes divided into safe spaces and risky spaces, not by walls, but by habit. The meaning of time changes as well. Days are no longer counted by markets and festivals, but by health and sickness. A good week is one without fever. A good month is one without death. Calendars become less important than memory. People remember the last time illness came, and they measure their safety by how far they are from it. Time becomes something to survive rather than something to celebrate. The sick are treated with both fear and care. People do not abandon them completely, but they approach slowly and carefully. Food is left at doors. Water is poured into bowls and slid across floors. Words of comfort are spoken from a distance. Touch is replaced by presence. Love becomes watching instead of holding. This form of care feels cold, but it keeps whole families alive instead of losing them together. Medical thinking continues to shift little by little. Doctors begin to write about what they see instead of what old books say. They note that people who breathe fresh air recover more often than those kept in closed rooms. They see that workers who wash themselves fall ill less often. They begin to suspect that sickness moves between people, even if they cannot explain how. Observation starts to replace tradition, slowly and quietly. Cities that survive long periods of plague begin to build differently. Streets are widened where possible. Wells are protected. Waste is moved farther from homes. Market areas are kept more open. These changes are not called public health, but they shape the future of cities. Stone and wood begin to reflect lessons learned from death. Architecture becomes part of survival. Children raised during plague years grow into cautious adults. They remember the rules their parents followed. They remember quiet streets and closed doors. When later generations forget these lessons, the plague returns. When they remember, it weakens. Memory becomes a tool as powerful as medicine. Across the countryside, villages that stay small and closed lose fewer people. They avoid fairs. They avoid large weddings. They avoid pilgrimages. Their lives are simpler, but safer. Trade slows, but survival continues. Isolation becomes a form of wealth. People slowly begin to accept that the plague is not sent only by fate or stars. They see that it follows roads, ships, and crowds. They see that it respects walls, distance, and time. This does not give them full knowledge, but it gives them direction. They begin to act as if sickness can be escaped even if they do not know exactly how. As another medieval night settles over empty streets and quiet houses, lanterns glow behind shutters. Inside, families eat what they have saved. They wash their hands in cold water. They dry their clothes near small fires. They listen for sounds outside and breathe slowly inside. The world remains dangerous, but it is no longer unknown. They do not understand microbes. They do not understand infection. They only understand that order protects where chaos kills. And in a world without science, this order becomes the strongest defense people can build against an enemy they cannot see. The story moves forward still, toward the long ending of the plague and the lessons it leaves behind for future generations, who will one day face sickness with knowledge instead of fear. As the long presence of the plague settles into the memory of towns and villages, people begin to live with a quiet understanding that sickness is not only something that arrives from outside, but something that can grow inside crowded and careless life. This realization does not come from books or teachers. It comes from watching which homes stay full and which become empty. Slowly, a new respect for space, air, and routine becomes part of ordinary thinking. Survival is no longer a sudden escape from danger. It becomes a slow way of existing that avoids danger as much as possible. Cities that endure repeated waves of plague begin to change their behavior in lasting ways. Markets are no longer packed tightly into narrow squares. Stalls are spread farther apart. Wells are protected with walls or covers. Waste is carried farther from homes instead of being left in streets. These changes are not guided by science, but by memory. People remember that sickness rises where dirt, water, and bodies mix too closely, so they begin to separate these things, even if they cannot explain why it works. The shape of the city slowly becomes wider, cleaner, and less suffocating than before. Inside homes, routines grow almost ceremonial in their repetition. Morning begins with cleaning. Floors are swept. Bedding is shaken. Water is fetched and covered. Hands are washed before food is touched. The day ends with smoke from herbs or wood drifting through rooms. These actions create a rhythm that replaces the rhythm of festivals and crowds. Life becomes quieter, but also steadier. The house is no longer just shelter. It is a system of protection built from habit. The way people think about strangers also changes deeply. In earlier times, travelers brought news, trade, and excitement. Now they also bring fear. Villages watch roads carefully. Inns stand half empty. People who arrive from far away are asked to wait before being welcomed. They are given food at a distance. They are watched for signs of illness. This waiting feels unkind, but it becomes one of the strongest defenses against sudden outbreaks. The idea that time can reveal danger slowly takes root in human thinking. Care for the sick grows more careful and more distant. Those who fall ill are no longer surrounded by family in crowded rooms. They are given space. Their bedding is kept apart. Their clothes are washed separately. Food is brought on separate dishes. This separation feels lonely, but it prevents whole households from being lost at once. Survival now means protecting the many, even when it hurts the one. Medical thought continues its slow movement away from old beliefs. Some doctors still rely on ancient ideas about balance and blood, but others begin to record what they see with their own eyes. They notice that those who live in open air survive more often than those who remain in dark, damp rooms. They see that touching the sick often leads to sickness. They begin to wonder if illness moves between people rather than coming from the sky or the stars. This wondering does not yet become science, but it becomes a seed of it. Religion also absorbs these changes. Churches remain important, but their doors are not always open. Prayer moves into homes. Faith becomes quieter and more private. People begin to believe that God listens just as well in small rooms as in large halls. This change reduces gatherings without breaking belief. Survival reshapes worship as gently as it reshapes work and family life. Children growing up during these years learn lessons that feel natural to them, but strange to their grandparents. They learn not to share cups. They learn to wash their hands. They learn to keep distance from coughing people. These habits become part of their bodies, not just their thoughts. When the plague weakens for a time, they do not forget. Their memory holds on to caution longer than fear alone ever could. In the countryside, isolation continues to protect those who live far from roads and ports. Farms that feed themselves avoid markets. Villages that close their gates lose fewer people. Distance from trade becomes distance from death. Simple living becomes safer living. Across all these places, one quiet truth grows stronger. The plague follows human connection. It walks where people gather. It rides where people travel. It waits where people touch and breathe together. Those who loosen these connections survive more often than those who keep them tight. This truth is not spoken in modern words, but it is lived every day. As another medieval night falls, the world feels changed in ways no one could have imagined before the sickness came. Streets are wider. Homes are cleaner. People move more slowly. Voices are softer. Behind closed shutters, families sit near small fires. They drink water they have guarded. They eat food they have stored. They listen to the wind instead of the crowd. They do not know they are building the early shape of public health. They do not know they are preparing the ground for future medicine. They only know that careful order keeps death farther away. And in this long, patient adjustment, the medieval world slowly learns how to live beside a sickness it cannot yet defeat, but can finally begin to weaken. As the long shadow of the plague stretches across generations, people begin to understand that survival is not only about avoiding sickness, but about reshaping life so that sickness has fewer places to hide. The medieval world does not suddenly become healthy, but it becomes more aware. Awareness settles into habits, and habits slowly turn into customs. What began as fear becomes structure. What began as panic becomes routine. In this way, entire communities learn to live in a way that quietly pushes the plague back, without ever seeing its true face. Cities that have endured many outbreaks no longer build as tightly as before. New houses are spaced farther apart when possible. Courtyards appear between rows of buildings. Wells are guarded more carefully, and waste is carried farther away from places where people sleep and eat. These changes are not guided by science, but by memory of loss. People remember that sickness thrived where filth, water, and bodies were trapped together. So they begin to separate them. Streets become places to move through, not places to live in. Air is allowed to flow. Light is welcomed where darkness once stayed. The city itself becomes part of survival. Inside homes, people continue to refine their daily rituals. Morning begins with sweeping and washing. Bedding is aired outside when the weather allows. Pots and cups are rinsed after every meal. Hands are cleaned before touching food. Smoke from herbs and wood drifts through rooms each evening. These actions give shape to the day and offer a sense of control in a world that has felt uncontrollable for too long. The house becomes not just a shelter from rain and cold, but a barrier against unseen danger. The way people treat illness also continues to change. The sick are no longer kept in the heart of the home. They are given separate spaces whenever possible. Their clothes are washed apart from others. Their bowls and cups are not shared. This separation feels lonely, but it saves entire families from falling at once. Care is still given, but it is given through distance. Words replace touch. Watching replaces holding. Love becomes a quiet act of restraint. Medical thinkers, though still bound by old ideas, begin to rely more on what they witness with their own eyes. They see that those who live in open, dry places recover more often than those in dark, wet rooms. They notice that those who avoid touching the sick fall ill less frequently. They do not yet know about germs, but they begin to suspect that illness travels along human paths. This suspicion does not yet form science, but it changes behavior. Observation slowly weakens tradition. Religion also bends under the weight of long experience. Great processions fade away. Large pilgrimages are postponed. Worship becomes smaller and quieter. Families pray in their own rooms. Candles burn in windows instead of in crowded churches. Faith remains strong, but it no longer demands closeness. It learns to live beside caution. This change protects belief by protecting bodies. Children who grow up in this time carry these habits into adulthood. They learn early that sharing cups is dangerous, that crowded rooms feel wrong, that fresh air is important. These lessons sink deep into their thinking. When later generations try to return to old ways, these adults hesitate. Memory becomes a shield passed from parent to child. Across villages and farms, similar patterns appear. Those who remain apart from trade roads lose fewer people. Those who grow their own food depend less on markets. Those who clean barns and seal grain attract fewer rats. These quiet changes weaken the paths along which plague travels. The countryside becomes a patchwork of safer and more dangerous places, shaped by how closely each community ties itself to the wider world. Slowly, without knowing it, medieval society begins to understand something that will take centuries to explain properly. Disease is not only an event sent by fate. It is something that follows human movement. It follows breath. It follows touch. It follows crowds. And if those paths are broken, the disease weakens. This understanding is not written down clearly, but it is lived every day in cautious footsteps and closed doors. As another quiet night settles over stone streets and wooden homes, the world feels different from what it was before the plague. Streets are wider, homes are cleaner, people move more slowly and with more thought. Behind shutters, families sit near small fires. They drink water they have protected. They eat food they have stored. They listen to the silence that once frightened them and now feels like safety. They do not know they are shaping the future of medicine. They do not know they are teaching the world how to survive invisible enemies. They only know that order, distance, and care keep life close. And in this slow transformation, the medieval world begins to move away from blind fear and toward something new. A way of living that does not defeat the plague, but learns how to stand against it without collapsing. As the long memory of plague settles into everyday thinking, survival becomes less about emergency and more about designing life so that sickness has fewer chances to enter it. Towns that have suffered deeply begin to change their rhythms in permanent ways. Streets are kept clearer of waste. Wells are guarded with walls and covers. Animals are pushed farther from human sleeping spaces. These changes feel practical rather than heroic. They do not come from sudden understanding. but from years of watching which places become quiet and which remain full of life. Slowly, people accept that filth, crowding, and still air invite death, while space, light, and routine push it away. The city itself becomes a lesson written in stone and wood. Inside the household, the idea of separation grows stronger. People no longer think of the home as one single space where everyone shares everything. Instead, it becomes divided by purpose. One area is for cooking, another is for sleeping, another is for those who are unwell. Bowls and cups are not shared freely. Bedding is kept apart. Water is fetched and covered. These divisions are not drawn on maps, but they exist in practice. They reduce how many hands touch the same objects. They reduce how many breaths fill the same corner of a room. In this way, the house becomes a small system of order inside a disordered world. The meaning of cleanliness deepens beyond simple appearance. It is no longer about showing respect or comfort alone. It becomes about protection. Floors are swept even when they look clean. Walls are wiped. Bedding is aired. Clothes are dried near heat. Smoke from wood and herbs is allowed to drift through rooms each evening. These acts drive away insects and dampness, two silent partners of disease. People believe they are chasing away bad air, but they are also chasing away the small creatures in wet places that allow sickness to survive. The home begins to smell of smoke and soap instead of rot and sweat, and this change quietly saves lives. Care for the sick becomes almost ceremonial in its caution. When illness appears, the family does not gather around the bed as before. They place the sick person near a window or in a separate room. Food is left nearby. Water is given carefully. Words of comfort are spoken without touch. This feels colder than the old way of caring, but it prevents the sickness from taking the whole household with it. Survival forces people to choose between closeness and continuation. They choose continuation, even when it hurts. Medical thought continues to loosen its grip on old certainty. Healers still speak of balance and humors, but they also begin to trust what they see. They notice that patients kept in fresh air sometimes recover. They notice that touching the sick often leads to sickness. They begin to suspect that illness does not fall from the sky at random, but moves from body to body along invisible paths. This suspicion does not yet become knowledge, but it shapes practice. Doctors stand farther away. They wash more. They open windows. Without knowing it, they step closer to truth by stepping back from tradition. Religion remains present, but it changes its shape again. Great public prayers and processions become rare. Families pray at home. Candles glow behind shutters instead of in crowded halls. Faith becomes quieter and more personal. It no longer gathers bodies together in large numbers. In this way, belief and survival begin to walk the same road. Worship continues without feeding the plague. Children born into this world grow up surrounded by rules that once would have seemed strange. They are taught to wash their hands before eating. They are taught not to share cups. They are taught to stay away from the coughing and the weak. These lessons do not feel like fear to them. They feel like normal life. The plague shapes their thinking long before they understand its name. When the sickness fades for a time, these habits remain, carried forward like inherited memory. In villages far from cities, isolation continues to be a quiet ally. Those who live away from ports and markets face fewer strangers and fewer waves of disease. They close their gates when news arrives of sickness nearby. They trade through walls instead of through doors. They wait before welcoming travelers. These acts feel harsh, but they protect the many by testing the few. Time becomes a filter through which danger must pass before reaching the heart of the community. Across regions, one lesson grows slowly and firmly. The plague does not move on its own, it moves with people. It rides on breath, on cloth, on fur, on hands. When people slow their movement, the plague slows. When they spread out, the plague weakens. When they clean their spaces, the plague loses places to hide. This truth is not spoken in scientific words, but it becomes part of how people choose to live. As another medieval night settles over streets that are wider and homes that are cleaner than before, families gather quietly near their fires. Water sits covered in clay jars. Bread cools on wooden boards. Smoke drifts slowly toward open cracks in the walls. Outside, the world still holds danger, but inside there is order. There is habit. There is care. They do not know the language of disease. They do not know the laws of microbes. They only know that space, light, and routine keep death farther away. And in this long, patient shaping of daily life, the medieval world moves one step farther from helplessness and one step closer to understanding, even if it will take centuries before that understanding finds its name. As the long centuries of plague finally begin to loosen their grip on the medieval world, survival is no longer only a matter of hiding or escaping. It becomes the story of what people have learned from living beside death for so long. Towns and villages do not wake up one morning to find the sickness gone forever. Instead, it fades slowly, wave by wave, leaving behind habits, memories, and quiet rules that remain even when fear begins to sleep. Cities that once choked under crowding now breathe more easily. Streets are wider. Waste is carried farther from homes. Wells are guarded. Animals are kept apart from sleeping places. These changes do not feel like victory. They feel like caution turned into stone and wood. The shape of towns itself reflects what the plague taught, that life survives best when it has room to move and air to breathe. Inside homes, the rituals of care remain even when danger weakens. Hands are still washed before meals. Bedding is still aired. Clothes are still dried near fire. Windows are still opened when weather allows. These habits no longer feel like emergency actions. They feel like ordinary life. What once came from fear now comes from memory. The home has learned how to protect its people without knowing why it works. The way people treat sickness also changes forever. The sick are no longer crowded by the healthy. Separation becomes natural. Care is given with distance. Tools and bowls are kept apart. Rest and warmth replace harsh treatment. The body is allowed to fight instead of being forced to suffer. Even without understanding medicine, people understand this. Pain does not cure, and closeness does not save. Religion finds a quieter voice. Worship no longer demands large crowds. Faith moves inward into families and small gatherings. Prayer becomes something shared inside walls instead of shouted in streets. Belief survives because it adapts. It learns to walk beside caution instead of against it. Children born after the worst years grow up in a world already shaped by loss. They do not remember open markets packed with bodies or festivals without fear. They inherit cleaner homes, wider streets, and calmer habits. The plague does not live in their bodies, but it lives in their customs. Memory becomes protection passed from one generation to the next. Slowly, something new is born from all this suffering. Not science yet, not medicine yet, but the idea that human behavior matters in the face of disease. that sickness does not only come from fate or stars or punishment, that it follows roads, hands, breath, and cloth, and that by changing these paths, people can change their chances of survival. The Black Plague does not disappear forever. It will return in later centuries, but it never finds the same world again. It finds towns that remember, homes that clean, people who separate the sick from the healthy, communities that close gates when danger approaches. The world is no longer blind. And so, if you had lived in that dark century, survival would not have come from courage alone. It would not have come from prayers alone. It would not have come from doctors alone. It would have come from small, patient choices made every day, staying away from crowds, keeping your home clean and dry, eating what you could grow yourself, avoiding travelers and trade when sickness was near, separating from the sick even when it hurt, letting fresh air move through your rooms, living slowly when the world demanded speed. These were not called rules. They were called life. As the medieval night finally grows quieter, imagine a small house at the edge of a town. Smoke rises gently from its roof. Inside, a family sleeps in clean air. Water rests in covered jars. Bread cools on a table. Outside, the roads are empty. The bells no longer ring. The plague has passed for now, and what remains is not only survival but a changed world. A world that has learned, slowly and painfully, that invisible enemies can be met with visible care. The story of how you could have survived the Black Plague does not end with death. It ends with habit, with memory, with quiet human adjustment. And as this long history comes to rest, the night deepens gently, and the medieval world, shaped by suffering and patience, finally finds a moment of stillness.